That afternoon, with the final contract waiting for his signature, a frightened hotel waitress suddenly stepped into the room. She pointed toward the translator and whispered, "He's not telling you what they said." The room went silent. David looked down at the contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars, wondering for the first time whether the deal in front of him was built on a lie. Before we continue, if stories about courage, honesty, and second chances mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, and let's continue. David had spent nearly 30 years turning a small engineering business into an international company. At 51, he was known for careful decisions and calm negotiations. That trust mattered most at the Grand Meridian Hotel, where 3 executives from a major German energy company had gathered to finalize a partnership that could create thousands of jobs. The contract already lay on the table. David spoke English, the executive spoke German, and Martin, his trusted translator of 5 years, stood between them. For the first hour, everything appeared normal. Then 25-year-old Sophie entered with a tray of coffee. She worked in the hotel restaurant, taking extra shifts and to cover her mother's medical expenses. Nobody knew Sophie had once studied German at university, planning to become an interpreter, until her mother became seriously ill and she left before finishing her degree. She never stopped studying. She placed the coffee on a side table and turned toward the door. Then she heard one of the German executives speak, discussing employee protections already agreed upon earlier. Martin translated it differently. According to him, the German company was demanding additional financial guarantees and major changes to the employment terms. Sophie stopped, thinking maybe she had misunderstood. Then another executive spoke, and Martin changed that sentence too. This time, Sophie knew something was wrong. She stayed outside the partially open door, listening as details were altered again and again. The Germans were asking for reasonable protections, while the Martin made their demands sound aggressive and expensive. Sophie's fingers tightened around the tray. She knew what interrupting could cost her. She was only a waitress, and Martin was a respected professional, trusted by a billionaire. If she was wrong, she could lose her job. If she stayed silent, David could sign a contract based on a lie. Inside the room, David reached for his pen. Sophie froze, then remembered why she had never abandoned her dream of becoming an interpreter. She turned around and pushed the boardroom door open. Every conversation stopped. Security moved toward her. Martin's confident expression hardened, and David slowly lifted his eyes from the contract. Sophie stepped inside, still holding the tray against her chest. Her voice shook. "Sir, I speak German." Martin gave a dismissive smile. "She's a waitress. She probably misunderstood." Sophie lowered her eyes, almost ready to apologize and walk away. Then David noticed something the others had missed. She wasn't angry, wasn't trying to impress anyone. She looked genuinely frightened, but certain. David placed his pen on the table. "Let her speak." Sophie explained that the first translation had changed an employee protection clause, the second had altered a production cost condition, and a third had made the German company appear to demand a concession that had never been mentioned. Martin immediately denied everything. David turned to the German executives. "Please, repeat the last statement." One slowly repeated it in German. Sophie translated. The meaning was completely different from Martin's version. David stared at the contract, no longer trusting the man beside him. He asked the executive to repeat the statement again. Sophie translated once more. The company hadn't demanded extra money. They'd asked for protections already discussed. "Translate that," David told Martin. Martin hesitated. That hesitation changed everything. The executives opened their notes, and Sophie translated several earlier statements. A deadline changed, a financial condition altered, a safety requirement reversed. David pushed the contract away. Martin insisted there had been a misunderstanding, but David requested an independent interpreter. Minutes later, the new interpreter confirmed Sophie's translations. Martin hadn't made a mistake. He had deliberately changed the meaning. The meeting was suspended. An investigation revealed why. Martin had secretly accepted payments from a competing company, planning to make the German executives look unreasonable and destroy the partnership before signing. Sophie had stopped the deal only minutes before it became final. Instead of blaming her, David personally thanked her. "You saved us from signing something we didn't understand." Sophie shook her head. "I just heard what they actually said." That answer stayed with him. David later learned about her unfinished education, modern languages, abandoned to care for her mother. She never stopped learning, practicing German during breaks and keeping an old language notebook in her locker. David offered to fund the education she'd been forced to abandon. Sophie was stunned and tried to refuse, but David explained he wasn't rewarding her for saving his company. He was investing in someone who had already proved the value of her courage. She accepted. If you're still with us, subscribe and stay to the end, because this decision changed far more than one woman's career. Several years later, Sophie returned to the same hotel as a professional conference interpreter. This time, no coffee tray. She stood at an international meeting, translating between business leaders from different countries. David watched from the audience. The experience had changed him too. His company began requiring independent language verification during major negotiations, and employees were encouraged to speak up when something seemed wrong, regardless of position. David never wanted another important truth ignored simply because the person who noticed it had the lowest title in the room. Sophie still remembered the moment before she opened that boardroom door, terrified, almost ready to walk away. But she understood something that afternoon. Courage doesn't always feel powerful. Sometimes it feels like fear, a racing heart, and one decision to speak anyway. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who believes doing the right thing is still worth the risk. And tell us in the comments, if you were Sophie, knowing you could lose your job, would you have opened that door or stayed silent?